Welcome to our live Hangout on Air from the Emerging Technologies for Online Learning Conference. Today we're being joined by Professor Green from Simpson College, and we're also being joined by a few students who have utilized Google Plus as students in a learning environment. We're also being joined by David Wicks. He's a professor at Seattle Pacific University. So to kick things off, it'd be great if we could just go around and have everyone introduce yourself and then briefly tell us about the context in which you personally use Google Plus. So take it away.
Okay, I'm Courtney and I used it in a computer authoring class for a real-time discussion once a week on the articles and topics we were discussing.
I'm Cottrell. I'm a first grade teacher in Western Washington. I used Google Plus Hangouts as in the same class that Courtney was in for a master's in education at Seattle Pacific University.
And I'm Mark Green. I'm a professor of management at Simpson College in Indianola, Iowa, and also a visiting professor at the University of Iowa. And I used Google Plus in the summer session for an MBA class on product management.
And I'm David Wicks, and this is kind of weird with a live audience and a virtual audience, but I was Cammie and Courtney's professor, and they were generous enough to experiment with me on this technology in the spring quarter, and then I've expanded the use, used it for planning for this conference, as well as I'm on an editorial board, and we used it for that as well.
So now I'd like to hear, what do you think is the most unique element that Google Plus has added either to your learning experience as a student or to your teaching experience?
The most unique thing that Google Plus has probably added is the idea of adding a virtual audience to the learning environment, which our program is completely online, and so there have been several occasions where I might recognize a name that I've had a class before, but I never actually met the person, and so this creates a better connection for putting a name to a face, and also the idea of adding the visual and the auditory learning aspect to the classes I'm taking.
I really enjoyed using it in a group project context. I actually took it out of the class last quarter, and I was taking a statistics class at the time, and that required a group project. And I had done group projects before online, and it's usually email, and instead of doing that, we just met on Google Plus Hangouts a couple times, like once a week or twice a week, and we just discussed the project on Google Plus Hangouts, and it just kind of simplified the process. And what was really nice is I was in one part of the state, and then my other two group members were in completely separate areas, and we were all able to meet and talk without having to actually drive anywhere.
Well, the thing that I find most unique is the ability to pull archived articles from various sources and link them right in a circle. Let's say I create a circle for a class. As you can maybe see on the wall behind me, I have clippings from lots of sources, newspapers and magazines. And these days it's very easy to just copy a URL, and then the functionality in Google Plus, I can just put that right there in a link, and it pops up usually a nice color graphic from the article. And so we can, it's kind of like Pinterest for articles. You know, I can sort of pin or put up there, instead of putting things on reserve, let's say, students can access those readings directly. And then that promotes informal interaction and sharing, and I'll put up an article, and then somebody else will say, oh yeah, I saw this other article, and then we start sharing, and pretty soon it just takes off. So I think that's, for me, that's a very important feature, functionality of Google+.
So for me, being able to address the issue of student isolation in an online course was really important. Traditionally, in an online course, I find it difficult to make connections if it's just text only. And so being able to, once a week, I actually had 3 different groups of students. I had a group of students who preferred to just text chat in Google+. I had a group that included Courtney and Cammie that like the video chat, and then I had a third group of students who just couldn't find time to do it, and so they watched the Hangout on air. They watched the YouTube video and had them interact using dialogues so that they were kind of having an asynchronous discussion and answering the questions. So I found that really addressing this issue of isolation plus meeting students' needs.
All right, now looking into the future a little bit, why don't you tell us in what one way are you most excited to utilize Google Plus in the future, either in a future class you plan to take or as an educator?
So as an educator, I'm an elementary school teacher, currently without my own classroom, but I hope to create a relationship with like a sister school either in another state or another country, kind of like similar to what we used to do with pen pals, just to create a learning environment that encourages acknowledgement of differences and another way to like receive the information or receive the the different ideas and interact with someone from a different culture, and either do that with like maybe a social studies lesson or like a reading unit.
I teach first grade in a predominantly Navy area. Most of the people who in my area are either in the Navy or work at the shipyard that supports the Navy. So a lot of my parents are constantly traveling or are deployed. So I could see using Google Plus Hangouts as a way to connect with those parents who are traveling as long as they have a webcam. For parent-teacher conferences, with the screen share option, I could scan in work samples and show them work samples from their students and show them data. I think it would be a lot more powerful to have that connection rather than trying to get a hold of them by phone.
Well, Google Plus for me this fall is going to be a very useful tool. I'm teaching a new course called Linguistics and Writing. It's a 100-level English course, and years ago I did graduate work in linguistics, and so I've sort of dusted off some of that old material, of course using new material as well, but I envision using Google Plus, the Google Docs, real time. We can work student writing. That's what the course is all about, workshopping education majors and helping them learn how to critique and teach writing. So we'll use Google Docs, it's perfect to work on student writing in real time, and we can put up a student's paragraph, and then people they can comment, they can annotate, and I think that'll be very powerful. I'm very excited about using it, and that's this fall, 1 month from now.
Well, I've already started this summer. I started to have students actually, I've dropped the use of the discussion board in Blackboard and had students actually make posts in Google Plus and then have other students comment on their posts. So I'm hoping that we're doing it within our circles right now, but I'm hoping that this kind of leads them to see some of the possibilities of social networking for professional development.
All right, and as veterans of Google Plus, do you have some best practices or key learnings that you feel are really important to know if anyone joining our session is interested in actually implementing this in the classroom? What are the most important takeaways for them?
One of the most important takeaways, I think, is learning the new set of etiquette that's going to go along with this new technology that we're integrating into the education world now. I equate it with, when we were introduced to cell phones about 10, 15 years ago, and there are things such as, making sure you're in the right environment for learning. When you are participating in a Google Hangout, making sure that there's nothing distracting, because it's not unlike when you're participating in just an asynchronous like Blackboard discussion. It's nobody can tell what kind of environment you're in, but now when we're live and participating, you want to make sure that your environment is quiet. So kind of taking away the etiquette and realizing that even though it's a casual environment, because most of us are probably in a home or an office where we're very comfortable, that it's still something that is for education and professional purposes.
I think that using the Google Plus and the Google Plus Hangouts features has the potential to become itself a best practice in higher education and specifically online education. I live in an area where the higher education opportunities are very limited, so I had to choose an online program in order to work towards my master's. So Google Plus Hangouts allowed me to connect to my classmates and my professors in a real way. Normally, like David was talking about, it's just on a Blackboard discussion. It's on a discussion board. You're reading everybody's posts. It's not real time, and I really miss the real-time conversation. And this made me feel like I was a student, a real student, having real conversations. And I'm taking 3 classes this quarter, and I really miss it. I wish that I had the option to have these real-time discussions in my current classes over the Blackboard discussions.
Well, let me give you 2 quick, brief case studies. And really, Cammie alluded to this earlier, the idea that you can be in different parts of the state or in different states and be linked in. A couple of semesters ago, I had a student who had surgery and was basically hospitalized and away from campus for the semester, and he wanted to keep up with his studies instead of just losing a semester. So what I did was I took a flip cam into the classroom and I set it up before every class. I recorded my lecture. I hooked the flip cam up to my computer and I burned a DVD and then I sent it to him, and it was very arduous. I mean, we got it done. It was very arduous. So so let's say a student is ill for an extended length of time. If we had the Google Plus hookup, he could be in his hospital or at home, whatever need be, and participate in real time. I think that's the key. Real time with a video link, a sense of engagement. And then the other thing, the second sort of brief case study is, we're here in central Iowa where in a typical winter there might be several snow days where students just can't make campus and the dean declares that we're closed for the day. And we've been tasked as instructors with coming up with a policy or an operating procedure. What are we going to do so that we don't lose an instructional day? So if we have Google Plus, we can agree ahead of time, listen, it doesn't matter if you're in the dorm snowed in or not, we can still hold class because it's Google Plus. So I think that's a very powerful tool just to have as a sort of a just-in-case backup channel for instruction.
I would say that it's critical if you're initially thinking this is an online course and you're going to just have a hangout every week and set a time. That's very difficult to do. So I use like a doodle to try to find times when people could meet, and that's why I had to end up with having multiple meetings with several groups of students. But I think considering it more like a blended course, where you actually specify when people sign up for the class that Tuesdays at 7 o'clock is when we meet for an hour. I think students would be responsive to that, and you wouldn't have to worry that maybe someone who's actually watching the replay really wanted to participate live, but you just didn't have the opportunity to provide that.
All right, now we're going to turn it over to the group who's live in the room with us to ask questions. So we have a mic, and we're going to come around and just raise your hand if you have any questions, and then any of our professionals who are joining us will be happy to answer for you. All right, we have a question. Yeah. Actually, if I can get you to come here. What is your question?
Okay, so my question is in terms of managing the classroom space, and especially with a larger classroom. I know some other products have features where you can raise hands and show ways to manage that. And I'm kind of watching screens kind of automatically flip. So I'm kind of wondering how that works in Google Plus, and if there are ways to control that, and or especially for larger classes, how you manage that space.
All right.
Well, so from that was something that I definitely had to learn about. But you can touch the screen I'm thinking about my iPad. You can touch your keypad and you can actually click on the video that you want to see. So you click on the little image of whichever one you want to display. And that's really important when you think you're recording something else that's going on and you're actually recording a person just sitting there listening. So whatever's on the big screen is what you're seeing. I think the students probably have some ideas there on how we had to kind of make do with the visual cues of knowing when to talk.
So I'll take a moment briefly and speak on this. The first time we participated in a discussion, we actually used an Adobe program where there was a hand-raising feature. You could click a button and it would tell everybody that you wanted to speak. Basically what we kind of just figured out through our discussions was that you just wait and you use your visual cues since you can see the person that you're talking with, and if you interrupt people, we just, okay, we interrupted you, sorry, and then we moved on. And you can also raise your hand, and the instructor and the other people you're participating with can see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say there was kind of a learning curve to knowing when it was, when the other person was finished speaking and when it was your turn. I think it was a little more difficult than when you're actually in a room with somebody, but you do get used to it, and you actually become a better listener because of it, I think.
I agree.
All right, I think you had your hand up.
I'm already streaming. I just wanted to see what the speed was. Do you require, what kind of connectivity speed do you need to actually see the live feeds? I'm looking at it over 4G now, and it's hiccuping and going very slow. So I'm wondering, I can't get it up on my conference, and so I'm wondering, what is the, do you have to be wired in at a university or a college where you have fast speed? If somebody's at home at a slower speed, can you use this particular technology?
Yeah, so typically you want to have a download-upload speed between 3 and 4. It can cause some delay if you are on a slower connection, but like Karissa was saying earlier, we can provide you the exact specs of what you need in order to have an effective Hangout. So
I can tell you that yesterday
that can be an issue at times, but as long as you're on a solid connection, you should be able to view it and interact.
Yeah, I was going to interject here. Yesterday we did a trial run of this, and I had my laptop at home, and I just have the internet provider, my wireless at home is, my cable TV and my phone and everything is just looped in. And it's not even high speed, but it's just, standard, what most people would have from your cable company, and it worked fine. And it wasn't even an Ethernet connection. I'm in my office now with an Ethernet connection, which is maybe a little bit better, but it worked fine from my home yesterday.
Yeah, I'm on a wireless connection right now, and there's minimal delay. So
I have, I guess, more of a comment. One of the things I'm going to be experimenting with this upcoming in the future is using the Pages feature that you mentioned, which is different from a profile, to overcome some of those obstacles that I mentioned earlier about trying to manually organize my circles. So if you create a page, it does allow you to generate a link to that page, and then you can share that link to the page, which could be, in theory, a course page, and then have your students go to that page and add the course page to their circles, and then you can add them back. So it helps a little bit with that process. So just a tip.
The one thing we always like to say, too, about creating pages, if you are operating a page, you do have to have the students add the page to their circles before you can add them back. And a lot of people don't know that, and so that can create some kind of, they have to take action on their part in order for you to be able to add them back, but that is a great suggestion and idea. Do we have any more questions for our participants? We'll take a couple more, and then Karissa and I can answer any other kind of follow-up questions about the platform as well. So any other questions for our participants? Oh, okay.
Okay, so the first question was, okay, I'll try that again. The first question was 20 or 30 students in the class. That wasn't my experience. I had more than 10, and you have to include yourself in that 10. So it does mean that you would have to find alternate times. So that's maybe a possible advantage for an Adobe Connect or a Blackboard Collaborate. But I think when you're looking at this and you're saying in terms of our the possibility that you can do it anytime you want, and there's no cost to the institution, it really changes that equation. And I was much more willing to have those smaller groups. Plus, pedagogically, the smaller group, there's a huge advantage when I have 10 or fewer people. They're much more likely to participate. When I've had larger classes in the past with Adobe Connect, I was actually, using chat, and the chat was going by so fast, I couldn't hardly keep up with what people were saying in the class. And the second question was, oh, okay, the integration of YouTube. So when you do a Hangout on air, you're actually able to, that goes to YouTube, your YouTube channel. And so then you decide what you want to do with that. Once it's over, if you want to make that a public video or a private one and just give people unlisted, just give students the link to where they can see it, that's your choice. And so you obviously have some issues. You have to seek the students' permission. And that was something, that I talked to both Cammie and Cammie and Courtney were willing participants in letting other people see the video. And I just kept it within the class just because I didn't feel like at this point I was ready to share those with the world. But it works really well to have a recording of your course.
And we can take one more question for our participants. Do we have one from the audience? You'll have to come up to me.
Is there a source where
Can you come up here?
I can speak up. Is there a source where one can read more about it? Because I can read. Is there some place in the or a link or something?
I can just give you a suggestion. Guy Kawasaki has a great book that you can download. It's like $2 or something on Amazon for a Kindle version. I don't know what it sells for otherwise. And I think there's at one time somebody was sponsoring a free version of it. But it's about a 10 or 12 chapter book. And for my students this summer, I just made it like a supplemental reading that we're going to be doing these things, and you should actually consider. You need to have this resource to figure out how to use it.
All right. Well, would any of our other virtual guests like to share anything? Did any of our questions spark any other thoughts or pieces of advice before you leave us?
Well, I would say, Karissa, that this is a very powerful social platform, and I think what's going to happen is students are going to devise ways to use this that we haven't thought of yet. I think we're going to find all kinds of new ways to use this as a resource. So I think it's a tool that the more people who know about it and find out what it does, we'll get a feedback loop, and they'll say, well, why don't we try this? And so I think students are going to have a ball with it. Mm-hmm. Unlike some of these closed systems like Scholar or Blackboard, which they're fine in and of themselves, but what do you do with those after you leave? Maybe as an education major, I don't know, Courtney and Cammie, whether you use Scholar or something like that in the school systems. But I would think that Google Plus, experience on Google Plus, I think is something that students will be able to take into the workplace, or certainly beyond the college or university, and find ways to use it.
Real quick, just one last comment. One of the big advantages of using a social platform like Google Plus versus Blackboard is that as a student, we can take what we've learned and what we've participated in from Google Plus and view it after the semester or the quarter is over. Whereas Blackboard, everything just disappears into the virtual world, and there's, what you've saved on your computer as a student, like papers and whatnot, and it's up to the individual student. But with with Google Plus Hangouts, it's really easy to go back and you can re-listen to the lecture, or use that to spark an idea or some interest when you're working on an assignment, or referencing it.
Yeah, and on Blackboard, you're never going to have the experience of staying after class to talk with your classmates. One night when we were, the conversation was technically over, 3 of us stayed in the Google Hangouts and talked for another 45 minutes about pretty much what we've been talking. I mean, it was completely relevant to the coursework, and we just, without David there, we just continued the conversation until it was like 11 o'clock, and we had work the next day.
We had to work.
So you'll never have that experience in Blackboard alone. So I think that is something that was very unique and special.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and to pick up from that, it's occurred to me, I've been in this business 30 years, and I've got students who've taken the course from me in the 80s, and I still correspond with them. So imagine, let's say my course in international marketing, we've got a circle for that class. I can invite alums to join that circle. They can take part in the conversation. One of my graduates is the CEO of Xerox Canada, and imagine looping him in to the conversation, and then they can share those links, because alumni development offices are keen to find ways to engage alumni, and what a great tool. And again, with Blackboard and Scholar, people are it's more of a registrar kind of issue. If you're on the class list, you're on Scholar, so that's a little more of a closed system, whereas with Google Plus, we can open it to anybody who wants to participate. And then, again, it can, after the semester's over, let's keep putting articles up there. Let's keep, let's stay engaged, which I think is very powerful.
Well, we'll have to wrap up now. It's 11 o'clock, but thank you so much for joining us. I know that the group in the room really appreciated all of your insights, so hope to talk to you soon.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye.